Welcome to Family History Mysteries, a podcast that tells the stories uncovered through family history research, the unexpected stories of everyday people. I am an avid family historian who has been compiling my family tree for over 15 years, with nearly 20,000 people recorded in my trees.
Episode 90, Part 4, Was Jack the Ripper in Australia? Warning, there is graphic information contained in this episode. So at the end of the last episode, Francis Bailey Deeming was eventually arrested and found out in Western Australia. And this episode begins with the initial questioning that is occurring over in Perth after his arrest. Initially denied he was Deeming. He later said, "I think I know the party who has been murdered. I don't believe anyone would have the heart to murder a girl like that." On the 15th of March, Sergeant Causey took Mr. Hirschfeld, the man who sailed with Deeming, out to Australia on the Kaiser Wilhelm II. They left Perth to go to Southern Cross. They identified Deeming and then escorted him to Perth to catch the Oceania at Adelaide. Furious demonstrations were made on their journey to Perth. There was a large crowd waiting at Perth Central Railway Station, and Williams was taken off at the nearby Lord Street station and taken to the Waterside lockup to avoid the crowds. Mr. Hirschfeld went to the jail there with Causey and formally identified Deeming, and this was his account. At this time, the prisoner wore spectacles. He also had a fair moustache, similar to the one he used to wear on board. I never saw him wear spectacles before. I saw the accused on the 27th when he was taken on board the Ballarat. There was a great alteration in his appearance. He either cut or shaved off his moustache. I was continually in the accused's company from Albany to Melbourne, and on the 27th of March he said to me, "Have you seen the body and who else was present at the identification?" I said, "Captain Firth and myself, and afterwards Mr. Oakes." He said, "No one of you can swear that that was the body of my dear little Emily. Nobody could hurt that poor little thing." And he added, "When I found out that, it really broke my heart." I said, "If you can produce your wife alive, you're all right. If not, you will have the rope around your neck." And he said, "I do not think I can produce her. Many innocent people have been hung, but if I am convicted, I will write the history of my life, and it will startle the world." Meanwhile, on the 16th of March, 1892, as Deeming is under arrest and on his way to Melbourne, Liverpool police visited Dinham Villa, broke in and were confronted with a putrid smell. When police to find the source of the smell, they pulled the fireplace apart in the kitchen and removed the hearthstones to find the body of a woman and two children, all in an advanced stage of decomposition. The corpses were wrapped in oilcloth. The woman lay upon her back while the two children were turned with their faces downward, lying one on either side of her. They then found two other children embedded in cement. They were Marie Williams, their daughter Bertha 9, who had been strangled, Marie 7, Sydney Francis 5, and Lilla 18 months, and they all had their throats cut. Police found a book with the name Deeming crossed out and Williams added, and they also found a small picture book with the name Bertha on it. Police were left with little doubt that Deeming and Williams were the same person. The next day, they allowed no person to interview Williams, and they engaged him in separate compartments in the railway carriage, and they instructed to make sure that the escort was armed. And interestingly, at this time, there's a little article that states other Williams. Solicitors received instructions yesterday from Mr. Edward Williams of Sydney to issue writs against the Age newspaper and the Herald for alleged libels containing in their reports concerning the Windsor tragedy. The sum of £2,000 is claimed from each of the papers, and the writs are to be issued this afternoon. On the 21st of March at the lockup, an inventory was taken of the trunk that was filled with Williams' possessions. Among its contents was a silver case with Emily engraved on the outside, with one pair of gloves inside. There was a double photo frame containing two photos, one of Williams and a little girl, and the other of a family, a father, a mother, and 3 children. A pocketbook containing a timetable of trains to and from Rainhill to St Helens Junction. One small battle axe with a very sharp blade. One master mason's apron with FBD monogram on it. and a Book of Common Prayer that stated on the front, December 26, 1889, Emily. Also found amongst the effects was a marriage certificate of Albert Oliver Williams and Emily Lydia Mather, solemnised 22nd of September 1891 in Rainhill, Lancaster, England, which then proved the identity of Deeming. Other articles, a parchment testimonial signed Benjamin Goodfellow Hyde, Hampshire, a silver case engraved with the name Emily, groups of photos by Pettingill of Liverpool and Braybrook of West Hartlepool, also by Cleland and Randigan Rockhampton. There's a members card of the Rainhill Band of Hope, certifying to the membership of Emily Mathers, an autograph album given to Emily Mathers, a pocket flask with a monogram BFD, articles of ladies' apparel, a prayer book marked Sarah Oates, and a book of addresses containing the names of Mrs. Gateskell, Cambridge Road, Seaforth, Mrs. Canham, Cambridge, Jessie MacDonald, Bergenhead, Mrs. Marshall, New York, Mrs. Oakton, Johnfield, Liverpool. West Australian Police Chief stated, "He is resolute and determined and will need vigilant watching on voyage." On the 27th of March, 1892, Deeming, Detective Causey, 3 armed police officers as well as 2 reporters boarded the train at the Midland Junction for the 250-mile overnight rail trip to Albany, where it was to meet the SS Ballarat that was travelling to Adelaide. The word had spread through the West that the child and wife murderer was passing through on his way to Albany, and the train was met by angry crowds shouting, "Lynch him, drag him out," and pull him to pieces with bullocks. The crowd rocked the train carriage and broke a window. Once inside the Albany jail, it's reported that his confident character had returned and he proclaimed his innocence to a keen audience. He joined in games of draughts and checkers with his jail keepers and was given a medical check-up to show that he was in good health, but noted that his wrists were bruised and there were open wounds due to the handcuffs that were never removed. Come morning, to the disbelief of his minders, Williams was missing his most distinctive large moustache. In Williams's prison clothes, they found a piece of glass bottle and found inside his cell the neck of a medicine bottle, and a piece had been broken off the bottle and used as a razor. And it also appeared that Williams had also plucked most of his moustache out. To the concern of Detective Causey, the missing moustache made Williams look completely different, and that the moustache could decide the prosecution's case. Due to the large and aggressive crowds, the decision was made to continue sailing to Melbourne rather than take the train from Adelaide to Melbourne as originally planned. And on the 1st of April, Mr. Hirschfeld was still there, remaining available to assist police, and his account was, "Deeming sent for me to have a talk. He said to me, 'Mr. Hirschfeld, no one can prove that the moustache I was wearing was not a false one.' I said, 'Yes, I can, and so can everyone else. And in cutting off your moustache, you have merely influenced the public mind against you.' And I added, 'There is no doubt you will be convicted and hung.' And he said, 'I can't help that. Never mind, I will keep my promise to you and give you the history of my life.' On the 2nd of April 1892, the SS Ballarat anchored in Port Phillip Bay, and Williams was whisked away to the police court. He was formally charged with the murder of Emily Lydia Williams, née Mather, and he was asked his real name, and he refused to answer, and he was charged as Albert Williams. After his arrest, Deeming wrote to Kate Ransfeld pleading his innocence and asking for money to pay his solicitors, instructing her to sell the jewellery he had so generously given her to meet legal expenses. Kate later testified against Deeming. On the 28th of April 1892, Deeming's trial begins in Melbourne and it lasts 4 days. Before the jury retired, Deeming made a lengthy, rambling speech of self-justification. He repeated a story he told the police that Emily had run off with another man, saying, "This is my one comfort, knowing that she is not dead." On the 2nd of May 1892, the trial concludes. The jury delivers a verdict of guilty after taking only 1 hour and 20 minutes to deliberate, and Deeming is sentenced to death by hanging. He spends his last days writing his autobiography and poetry. The jury listened well to the yarn I had to tell, but they sent me straight to hell. In Melbourne jail, Deeming revelled in his notoriety and boasted that the world didn't know what he'd gotten away with. It was concluded that Deeming clearly had a disturbed mind and was described as one of the strangest individuals you could come across. He was also street smart. On the 6th of May, 1892, he petitioned to have his sentence commuted. And on the 9th of May, 1892, His Honour Mr Justice Hodges reviews the evidence given with care, more especially the bearing upon the question of the prisoner's sanity. It was confirmed that he was certainly infected with syphilis, which may have also impaired his cognitive functions, including fantasising about his past. And he expresses his concurrence in the finding of the jury that the prisoner is not insane. A letter is read from Dr O'Connor, the visiting surgeon of the HM jail in Sydney, testifying to the prisoner having suffered from epilepsy in 1882. After due consideration, the council are unanimous in the opinion that the law should be allowed to take its course, and they concurred this view and directed the sentence of death to be carried out on the 23rd of May, 1892. On the 20th of May, the last few days before he was executed, there were possible rumours of the connection between the Whitechapel murders in London's East End, and there were rumours that Deeming had confessed to 2 of the Whitechapel murders, but were largely ignored though because police believed he was trying to stall the date with the gallows. And you would have noticed from the description of the Jack the Ripper cases that 2 seemed to be the modus operandi of Deeming. 23rd of May, after a failed appeal to the Privy Council, Deeming is hanged in the Melbourne jail. More than 10,000 people gathered near the jail and in the streets celebrating his death. On the 24th of May 1892, covers the execution. Unusual interest was manifested in the execution, and at 10 o'clock a large number of persons had obtained orders for the sheriff were admitted to the jail. Deeming walked to the gallows calmly smoking a cigar. Presented a most woebegone appearance, the anticipation of his shameful but well-deserved end having caused his face to become pinched and his body much reduced. With his closely cropped hair and clean-shaved face, the criminal characteristics were particularly noticeable about his head and features. His face was blanched with fear. His shivering form had to be supported by the assistant hangman and warder. Addressing the prisoner, the sheriff said, "Albert Williams, if you desire to say anything, you will now be afforded an opportunity of doing so." A gurgling sound came from the prisoner's throat in response. To those who were below the gangway on which the drop is situated, it sounded like no. But those who were near the prisoner could distinguish the words, "Lord, receive my spirit." The executioner pulled the lever and the drop opened with a bang. Deeming fell 7 feet and 4 inches and death was instantaneous. The body swung lightly in front of a large breathless crowd of ticket-holding officials and members of the press. After his body was taken down, a death mask was made and sent to Scotland Yard for reference in the Rainhill investigations, and in case Deeming's claims of being the Ripper were later proven. And this is displayed in the Black Museum, and it is described to visitors as being the death mask of Jack the Ripper. And the minister was assigned to Deeming prior to his hanging in the jail said, "On the whole, I can candidly affirm that Deeming was the most complex human problem I've ever attempted to solve, and as the result proves, the most hopeless and unsatisfactory. To say that he was a human tiger does not by any means cover the whole ground. For those who knew him best affirms that up to the year 1888 he was a sterling friend, an affectionate father and a good husband. From that period and from causes he freely states, the animal in its most ferocious character held away over him." The strain upon Mr. Scott in his daily contact with the murderer culminated in an attack of nervous exhaustion after a hasty summons to the jail on the Sunday afternoon. Mr. Scott left the cell much moved, and during the evening service of Footscray he found himself quite incapable of continuing his duties. The task of attending the convict in the last hour of his life changed over to Reverend Whitten, who took with him Reverend Forbes, and they found Deeming to be in a prostrate condition and thoroughly unstrung. He joined in the devotional exercises with apparent earnestness and sincerity and wept and sobbed bitterly during much of the time. Amongst the utterances he made in prayer was the significant sentence, "God forgive me for having dispatched my poor wife and family without warning." This was the first admission that he'd made of his guilt in the Rainhill crime. Previously, he strenuously denied murdering his wife and children. In a letter to his brother Walter, he repeated the explanation of the Windsor tragedy that he'd previously given, that he had doubtless done the deed because the evidence was too strong to admit of any doubt, but he had no recollection of it. And also, it's curious to note that in his last days, Deeming varied his signature. During his trial and until a few days ago, he styled himself and insisted on being Baron Swanston. He refused to recognise the names of Williams or of Deeming, and invariably, if addressed by either of them, he said, "That is not my name, I am Baron Swanston." With death approaching, however, he was not so careful of his signature and signed the first of his aliases as struck his fancy. The last writing done by the prisoner was a hymn entitled "To God I Call" and composed by F.B. Deeming on the day before his death. And in the last will and testament of Frederick Bailey Deeming, made on the 18th of May 1892, and it also says, "Known here as Albert Oliver Williams, also known as Baron Swanston. I give and bequeath to my dear brother Edward Deeming of London 1 18-carat gold curb Albert watch chain and 3 gold coins attached to the same. I give and bequeath to Robert Garn of Millers Point, Sydney, 1 leather-bound photo album and a calendar watch in a red Morocco case." And then he bequeathed gifts to the governor of the jail and 4 warders. He then says, "I give and bequeath to Kate Ransfell my will made on the 9th of May 1892 in return of her kindness to me and as a token of the lies she told in court." So basically what he's saying there is that he's renouncing anything that he outlined in his will prior. He gave his lawyer all of his property that was now in the hands of the police, and also what is in the jail except what is mentioned in the above will. He actually gave the governor of the Melbourne jail a piece of land that he stated that he owned, 52 by 150 feet, block number 26, section 14 in Lismore in New South Wales and Queensland, and the deeds of which are banked in the Joint Stock Banking Company of Sydney. And he bequeathed to his solicitor a block of land number 27 in the same section. He gave and bequeathed to his solicitor all the writings that were written by him in the jail in any way pertaining to my biography, poetry, and all letters left by me, including 3 letters written by Kate Ransfell, including paper of instruction with drawings to enable his solicitor to secure money buried in Lamu, East Africa, the money to be disposed as stated in instructions, with the exception of what is mentioned for Kate Ransfell, and that part will go to Marshall Lyle and nothing to the said Kate Ransfell. The autobiography of my life. The autobiography of his life. Well, English publishers actually offered £1,000 to the rights of his writings, but it's believed that the Australian government destroyed it when he was executed, but that may have actually shed some light on the link to the Whitechapel murders. So it says that the biography written by me in 12 chapters, 8 of which Marshall Lyle has got, and 4 of which will be in the hands of the jail authorities. I give and bequeath to Maria Pickering of Rainhill, England, 1 silver sandwich box marked Emily on the lid. Also all ladies' clothing found with my effects, including the box and its contents found at Bairnsdale Station. He then gave to Mrs. Robert Garn of Millers Point, Sydney, a boat-shaped diamond ring that was in the hands of the police. And he said, "I hereby declare that the only debts owed by me are as follows. Mrs. Snell of Snell's Hotel, £2, Southern Cross, Western Australia, and the sum of £8, 8 shillings to Mr. Mandelson, storekeeper. These 2 accounts I asked Marshall Lyle to pay. And my last desire is that every word of the contents of my will be published in Melbourne papers." So just some details of his children with Maria James. Bertha was born on the 22nd of April 1884 at Roundtree Street, Balmain in New South Wales. And Deeming stated that his name was Frederick Bailey Deeming on the birth certificate, that he was 30 and born in England and was a plumber and gas fitter. It stated that his wife was Marie James, 29, born in New South Wales, and the certificate stated they married in 1881 in England. The second child, Maria, she was born on the 29th of March 1886 at Riley Street, Woolloomooloo. And Frederick, again named his proper name, but Frederick Bailey Deeming on the certificate, saying he was 33, born in Cheshire, England, and was a gas fitter. And it was stated that Marie James was 32 and born at Pembrokeshire, Wales. The certificate stated that they were married on the 28th of February 1880 in Cheshire, England. These two birth certificates were found in his possession at the time of his arrest. The third child, Sydney Francis, was born at sea in 1887, quite possibly on the way to South Africa. And Martha Lila, known as Lilla, was born in July 1891 in England. Miss Helen Nellie Matheson. Helen died in April 1939 in Leeds, Yorkshire, England, aged 71, under her maiden name, so she did not marry again. Emily Lydia Mather. Months after her death, a friend of Emily's, with the unlikely name of Mr. Edward Thunderbolt, wrote to the Chief Secretary of the Colony of Victoria seeking permission to have Emily's body exhumed from its pauper's grave in the Melbourne General Cemetery and buried in the Church of England section. Thunderbolt was given permission as a special case, and he raised money by public subscription for the construction of a large memorial stone. He himself composed a poem of warning entitled Advice to adorn the stone, and her body was moved to that part of the cemetery in late 1892. And Kate Ransfell was born on the 14th of May 1853 in Callington, Cornwall, England. She was the daughter of Joseph and Jane Ransfell. She was a refined young woman, and she came out on the Dakar with her brother and sister, and for 3 years was engaged in business in Brisbane. Her elder sister, who has been also a mother to her since their own mother died, was for some considerable time engaged as a milliner in one of the principal drapery establishments in Bathurst. She had the esteem and regard of everyone who knew her in Bathurst. Only in September last, Kate was on a visit to visit her sister, and shortly after she accompanied her brother Thomas to Broken Hill, intending to keep house for him. This young man's also well known, as he was for a long time a waiter at the Royal Hotel. The brother and sister were at Broken Hill during the winter famine, and the general discomfort of the place so impaired her health that she left and was on her way home via Melbourne and Sydney when she met Deeming. And it stated in this article that the reason for him wanting to marry her so quickly, he said he had a delicate sister he had taken to England and no home, and that is why he wanted to hurry on the marriage. Kate and her sister both asked if the marriage could be deferred, but he pleaded so hard that they yielded. So Kate Ransfell is known in Australia as being one of the few that avoided being the next victim of Frederick Bailey Deeming. After her brush with death, she left Australia for Canada and lived near her sister Lizzie. She never married and had a successful career as a milliner in Montreal, Quebec. She arrived in New York aged 50 on the 5th of August 1923, and she died in Montreal on the 2nd of August 1955 at the age of 82. So, the amazing life and times of Frederick Bailey Deeming. And I'll leave it up to you whether you believe that there was a definite link between the Whitechapel murders and also the Iberia gold robbery. And this.
If you are interested in sharing your story on my podcast, Family History Mysteries, please go to my Facebook page and send me a message. If you would like some assistance in filling in the gaps in your family tree to see what mysteries you solve, please get in touch. And don't forget, you can have early access to episodes by subscribing, and you'll also gain access to bonus episodes.